My life changed in a way I never thought possible. My wife, Lilac, cheated on me with her ex. It felt surreal, something I had only heard about from others or seen in movies and on social media. But experiencing it firsthand was something entirely different. It shattered my world into pieces, leaving me questioning everything I believed about love and trust. I'm just a simple guy, a university professor. I've been married to Lilac for 10 years, and we have two wonderful sons, James and Max. We built a life together, or so I thought. Our story began at a family party when my aunt suggested I ask Lilac out. I wasn't really interested in dating, I was too busy with my PhD studies. But the moment I laid eyes on Lilac, I was mesmerized by her beauty. She was like a flower, delicate and enchanting. Our parents had already met at that party and were eager for us to get married. After some encouragement, I gathered the courage to ask her out. Our first date was incredible. Lilac was fun, lively, and studying dentistry at the time. We hit it off instantly, and after dating for a year, we got married. Fast forward 10 years, and everything seemed perfect. Our daily lives were pretty normal. Lilac was a fantastic mother and a loving wife. I felt lucky to have her by my side. There were no signs of trouble, at least, not until recently. About a month ago, everything changed. I started noticing little things. It was an ordinary evening when Lilac came home much later than usual. I was worried because I hadn't heard from her all day. I tried calling her, but she didn't pick up. At first, I thought she was just busy with patients at the clinic, so I decided to check in with her receptionist. When I called, I got the shocking news. Lilac hadn't even shown up for work that day. My heart raced with anxiety. Where was she? What was going on? I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. The minutes felt like hours as I waited for her to come home. Finally, after midnight, she walked in, looking exhausted. Before I could even ask where she had been, she brushed past me and claimed she had a long day with patients. That moment was the first crack in the facade of our perfect life. I sat on the couch, confused and anxious. Her words felt like a lie, and I couldn't understand why she would lie to me. I tried to push the thoughts away and went to bed, hoping to forget about it all. But that night, I found her in our bedroom, dressed in her office clothes, with her legs hanging off the bed. She seemed peaceful as she slept, but something was off. I noticed a faint smell of alcohol on her breath. Lilac had never touched a drink during our marriage. My heart sank. I covered her with a blanket, unsure of what to think or feel. The next morning, I left for work early, wanting to avoid any conversations that might lead to arguments. My mind was racing with questions. I had a lot of work to do preparing exam questions for my students, so I tried to focus on that. When I got home later that evening, I noticed Lilac's car in the driveway. As I sat on the porch, petting our cat, I glanced through the window and saw her smiling and blushing while texting someone. My heart sank again. The moment I walked in, her cheerful demeanor vanished. She greeted me with a curt hello, and the atmosphere felt heavy and awkward. That night, I asked her to bring me a warm cup of coffee. She held the cup in one hand while still texting, laughing quietly to herself. I glanced at her and felt a rush of anger when I saw our younger son, Max, nearly get burned by the hot coffee. I shouted at Lilac for being careless for the first time in our 10 years of marriage. She apologized repeatedly, but it felt like a hollow gesture. After that, I decided it was time to have a serious conversation with her. I let the boys play video games for a while, hoping to have a private moment. Instead of confronting her about where she was the night before, I asked her what was on her mind and who she was talking to on the phone. Lilac looked at me apologetically, and just as she was about to speak, Her phone buzzed again. It buzzed 3 times in a row, and I could feel my irritation growing. She finally told me that she had met an old friend, and they decided to catch up, which explained her late arrival home. But she still didn't mention her absence from the clinic or the alcohol. I couldn't help but feel that hiding the truth was a form of betrayal. It was a red flag that things were not as they should be. That night, I couldn't shake the feeling of distrust. I stayed up late, watching her texts light up the screen, and I was worried. I had always thought our marriage was solid, but now everything felt uncertain. As days turned into weeks, I noticed Lilac texting late into the night. One night, I overheard a conversation that made my stomach drop. She was speaking to someone, saying, "Nah, it wasn't a dream marriage. It's boring and outdated. I need some spice in my life." My heart raced. Was she really saying these things? Did she think I was a boring husband? Had I truly failed her as a partner? It was a crushing realization. I thought we were happy. How could she say those things? My mind raced with questions. Who was this new friend? What did he offer her that I couldn't? I felt like my whole life was a lie. After that night, I became suspicious. I started following her to see what she was really up to. It was a desperate move, but I needed answers. The more I observed, the worse it got. If she could hide minor things, what else was she keeping from me? One morning, I offered to drop her off at the clinic. She hesitated before saying she had a parent-teacher meeting to attend. I found this strange because I knew the meeting had happened the day before, and I had already been there. But instead of confronting her, I kept quiet, storing this detail away. While I was at work, I received a call from the clinic. The receptionist asked me why Lilac hadn't shown up for days and why she wasn't responding to calls or texts. Patients were frustrated because they had scheduled appointments, and no one had heard from her. Everything was adding up, and my suspicions deepened. I couldn't ignore the signs any longer. I decided to confront her when I got home. That evening, I returned to a quiet house. My boys were studying, and the nanny was taking care of them. I cooked dinner, my mind racing with thoughts of how to approach Lilac. During dinner, I casually asked James about the parent-teacher meeting, and he looked confused. "What meeting?" he asked. My heart dropped again. I turned to Lilac, and her face turned pale. She had clearly been caught in another lie. I pressed her, asking if she had spoken to the teacher about James' progress. She claimed she just wanted to talk, but I was skeptical. As I continued to eat, I felt a mix of anger and disappointment. I finally asked how she could forget about something so important while constantly being on her phone. She snapped back, angry, saying I was implying that she did nothing but text all day. I tried to remain calm, but I was furious. She accused me of not doing enough for our family. Her words cut deep. I wanted to shout back, but instead, I took a deep breath and let her finish. "That's not what I meant," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I'm just worried about you." In that moment, she revealed her feelings again, claiming our marriage was stale and boring. I laughed bitterly, realizing how far we had fallen. "Thank you for bringing this up," I replied sarcastically. "It seems like you've turned this conversation into a shield for your own guilt." I could feel my frustration building, but I didn't want to escalate the situation. As the days passed, I began to follow her more closely, piecing together the truth about her late nights and secretive behavior. Every lie she told felt like another nail in the coffin of our marriage. I started to feel the weight of betrayal heavy on my heart. I couldn't let this continue. I needed to confront her with the truth. I decided that I would gather all the evidence before making my next move. I didn't want to jump to conclusions without knowing everything. One evening, I returned home early from work, determined to catch her in the act. I saw her sitting on the couch, texting as usual. She looked up at me, startled, and quickly put her phone away. I could see the guilt in her eyes. "Who are you talking to?" I asked, trying to keep my voice calm. "Nobody, just some friends," she replied, but I could tell she was lying. "Friends?" I pressed. "Are you sure about that?" "I'm just trying to keep in touch with people," she said defensively. "I thought we were a team," I said, my heart aching. "I thought we were supposed to share everything." Lilac's expression softened, and for a moment, I thought she might open up. But instead, she withdrew even more, avoiding eye contact and pretending to be interested in the TV show. In that moment, I felt lost. The woman I loved seemed to be slipping through my fingers. I couldn't recognize the person sitting across from me. My heart was breaking, and I felt a mix of rage and sadness. I couldn't let this go on any longer. I decided it was time to have a real talk, to lay everything on the table. I took a deep breath and said, "Lilac, we need to talk." Her eyes widened, and I could see a flicker of fear. "About what?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly. "About us," I said firmly. "About what's really going on in our marriage." As we sat together, I felt the tension in the room thicken. This was my moment to confront her about everything: the late nights, the lies, the distance. I had to know the truth, no matter how painful it might be. "Lilac, I feel like you've been distant for weeks. You've lied to me about your work and your friends. I don't want to accuse you, but I need you to be honest with me," I said, my voice shaking with emotion. Tears welled up in her eyes. "I'm not lying," she insisted, but I could hear the cracks in her voice. "Then why did you say those things about our marriage? Why did you lie about the meeting?" "I was just trying to avoid conflicts," she confessed. "I didn't want to hurt you. But lying does hurt me. It breaks my trust," I said, feeling the floodgates of emotion open. We sat in silence for a moment, the weight of the truth hanging heavy in the air. Finally, she broke down. "I don't know what's happening to us," she admitted. "I feel lost." I realized then that our love was slipping away, like sand through my fingers. I had to fight for our marriage, for our family. "We can work through this," I said, my heart full of hope. "But we have to be honest with each other. No more lies." As she nodded, I felt a flicker of hope igniting within me. Perhaps we could rebuild our marriage, piece by piece. It wouldn't be easy, but if we could confront the truth together, we could find our way back. My life changed in a way I never expected. My wife, Lilac, cheated on me with her ex. It felt unreal, like something out of a movie. But experiencing it shattered my world, making me question everything I thought I knew about love and trust. I'm just an ordinary guy, a university professor. I've been married to Lilac for 10 years, and we have 2 amazing sons, James and Max. Our love story started at a family party when my aunt encouraged me to ask Lilac out. At first, I wasn't interested in dating, but when I saw her, I was captivated by her beauty. She was like a delicate flower. Our families were eager for us to marry, and after some encouragement, I finally asked her out. Our first date was fantastic. We clicked right away. Lilac was studying dentistry at the time, and I felt lucky to have her in my life. We got married a year later, and everything seemed perfect. Fast forward 10 years, and our life was normal. Lilac was an amazing mother and a loving wife, and I thought we had built a great life together. But about a month ago, things started to change. I noticed little things. One evening, Lilac came home much later than usual. I was worried because I hadn't heard from her all day. When she finally arrived home after midnight, She looked tired and brushed past me, claiming she had a long day at the clinic. I felt uneasy, like her words didn't match the truth. That night, I found her in bed, still dressed in her work clothes, with a faint smell of alcohol on her breath. She had never drunk during our marriage. My heart sank. I tucked her in, confused about what to feel. The next morning, I left for work early to avoid any talk that could lead to a fight. Later that day, I called her receptionist and learned that Lilac hadn't shown up for work at all. Panic set in. Where could she be? When she came home later, I noticed her cheerful mood vanished when she saw me. I offered to make coffee, but she continued texting, laughing quietly to herself. I was filled with anger when our younger son, Max, nearly got burned by the hot coffee. I shouted at Lilac for being careless, something I'd never done before. Her apologies felt empty. I knew I had to confront her. That night, I asked her who she was texting. She looked at me apologetically, but just then, her phone buzzed multiple times. I felt irritation grow. She said she'd met an old friend and decided to catch up, but she didn't mention her absence from the clinic or the alcohol. Days passed, and I grew suspicious. One night, I overheard her say, "It wasn't a dream marriage. It's boring and outdated. I need some spice in my life." My heart raced. Did she really think I was boring? It was a crushing realization. I started following her to uncover the truth. The more I observed, the more I worried. I offered to drop her off at work, but she hesitated, claiming she had a parent-teacher meeting. I found this odd since I knew the meeting had already happened. But I kept quiet, tucking that detail away. While at work, I got a call from the clinic. The receptionist asked why Lilac hadn't shown up for days and why she wasn't answering calls. Patients were frustrated, and no one had heard from her. Everything was adding up, and my suspicions grew. It was time to confront her. That evening, I came home to a quiet house. The boys were studying, and the nanny was taking care of them. I cooked dinner, my mind racing with how to approach Lilac. During dinner, I casually asked James about the parent-teacher meeting, and he looked confused. "What meeting?" he asked. My heart sank again. I turned to Lilac, and her face turned pale. She had been caught in another lie. I pressed her about the meeting, and she claimed she just wanted to talk to the teacher. I was skeptical. I felt anger and disappointment. I finally asked how she could forget something so important while always being on her phone. She snapped back, accusing me of not doing enough for our family. I tried to stay calm, but I was furious. "That's not what I meant. I'm just worried about you." In that moment, she revealed her feelings again, saying our marriage was stale. I laughed bitterly, realizing how far we'd fallen. "Thank you for bringing this up," I said sarcastically. "It seems like you've turned this conversation into a shield for your own guilt." Days continued to pass, and I kept following her, piecing together the truth about her late nights and secretive behavior. Every lie felt like another nail in our marriage's coffin. I knew I couldn't let this continue. I needed to confront her with the truth. One evening, I got home early from work, determined to catch her in the act. I saw her sitting on the couch, texting. She looked up, startled, and quickly hid her phone. I could see the guilt in her eyes. "Who are you talking to?" I asked, trying to stay calm. "Nobody, just some friends," she replied, but I could tell she was lying. "Are you sure about that?" I pressed. "I thought we were a team." Lilac's expression softened, and I hoped she might open up. But instead, she withdrew, pretending to be interested in the TV. In that moment, I felt lost. The woman I loved was slipping away. I couldn't let this continue. It was time for a real talk to lay everything out. I took a deep breath and said, "Lilac, we need to talk." Her eyes widened with fear. "About what?" she asked. "About us," I said firmly. "About what's really going on in our marriage." As we sat together, the tension was thick. I had to confront her about everything: the late nights, the lies, the distance. I needed to know the truth. "Lilac, I feel like you've been distant for weeks. You've lied about your work and your friends. I don't want to accuse you, but I need you to be honest with me," I said. Tears filled her eyes. "I'm not lying," she insisted, but I could hear the cracks in her voice. "Then why did you say those things about our marriage? Why did you lie?" She confessed she was trying to avoid conflict and didn't want to hurt me. "Lying hurts me. It breaks my trust," I said, feeling overwhelmed. We sat in silence, the weight of the truth heavy in the air. Finally, she broke down. "I don't know what's happening to us," she admitted. I realized then that our love was slipping away. "We can work through this," I said, hopeful. "But we have to be honest. No more lies." As she nodded, I felt a spark of hope. Maybe we could rebuild our marriage, piece by piece. It wouldn't be easy, but if we faced the truth together, we could find our way back to each other.